This episode of Brains on Games will preview a game about science fiction repo men. Welcome to Brains on Games. I'm Dr. Brian McDonald, and this week we are going to preview a game that's coming up on Kickstarter very soon. A game that was sent to me, quite recently by the folks over at Auburn Games, and it's a science fiction themed game called Distress Call. Now, this is a game for between 3 and 5 players. You can play a game in 20 to 40 minutes, and it's suitable for kids age 14 and up, although I would say younger kids, 10 to 12-year-olds, could figure this one out. Let's take a deeper look at Distress Call. Distress Call is a light game in terms of its complexity, and what you're trying to do is earn the most victory points, and you do that by collecting these cubes of different colors through the game. The first player to win 2 scoring rounds is going to be the winner at the end of Distress Call. At the start of the game, you're going to assign roles to each of the players. So we played a 3-player game, and we had roles something like this. These are your corporate ID badges. The rulebook has kind of a science fiction corporate theme that's humorous. It sort of reminded me as I was reading through the flavor text of the old Paranoia RPG, if you've ever seen that one. But you're going to be assigned these roles, and I say repo men, but repo women as well, and some of them are robots. So what's going to happen here with these roles is that these ID cards, these ID badges, are going to tell you how many points you earn for different colored cubes. Now, one of the things that we noticed in the prototype, and this is a prototype, so I know that some of the components are going to change. These boxes here are going to be a little less boxy, but one of the things that jumped out at us in the rule book and on the cards is that the blue cubes are represented as a more purpley shade on the cards and in the rule book. Once you've got the ID badges assigned, you're really going to get started by shuffling up a deck of these distress calls, and you're going to deal out 3. Each scoring round is going to have 3 of these distress calls on it. And when you flip over the first one, you only flip over one at a time, you're going to see what mission you're going on, and the mission has a certain number of cubes that you're going to be trying to collect. You put those cubes in these exact numbers, 4 red ones and 5 blue ones, etc., into this bag, and you shuffle them around. Once you've shuffled up the bag of cubes, you're going to be dividing them up in between these pallets. So you're going to have 1 wooden pallet for each player and an extra golden pallet. The person who chooses, because you're going to do some drafting here, and the player who chooses the golden pallet is going to be the employee of the moment, and that means they're the first player in the next round of the game. Once the cubes are in the bag and they're all shuffled around, the first player is going to dole them out, starting with the golden pallet, and put 1 on each of these pallets around in a circle, so they're all sort of randomly distributed and assigned to these different pallets. You might have a different number of cubes on each one. And then you begin drafting the pallets. Like I said, if you take the golden one, you're going to be the first player in the next round, so that can be an important one. But these others also have some cubes on them that are potentially going to earn you some points at the end of the game. Now, these natural colored cubes, the lightest ones, these little wooden ones that aren't painted any color, this is space trash. And these cubes are really important in the game. They don't earn you any points, but they will cancel out some points once you get to the scoring round. Once each player has drafted their pallets, and because there's one extra one player is going to get 2 pallets, they're going to put those cubes into these storage crates. Oh, and these are kind of cleverly designed. They lock in the front, and like I said, the design is going to change a bit. This is a prototype. They lock in the front, and you're going to drop the cubes into this hole in the top, which has a clever little mechanism that prevents you from looking through the hole to see what's inside. So they kind of drop through into these little boxes, and then they're locked up until you get to the scoring round. They're a little creaky here on the prototype. So you've got to put all of your cubes from your pallet into a single crate, and you can hear it rattling around. And one at a time, that's what's going to happen. Each player is going to choose a crate. All 3 players in a 3-player game could choose the same crate if they wanted to. And sometimes that did happen. You might have 2 players who pick the same one, and then you're just filling them up with the cubes. You do not get to look at what's inside the crate until you get to the scoring round. Once everyone's distributed the cubes, they go on to the next distress call. You refill the bag with this number of each color of cubes. You draft pallets once again. You dump that cargo that you've collected into these different boxes. Once you've done all 3 missions, and each time you're going to be dumping cubes into these crates, then you finally get to look and see what's inside. That's when you do the scoring. So all the players are going to count up all of the crates. You're not choosing just one. You're looking at the colors of the cubes, and overall, you're going to count them up. So the Xenobotanist here and the Mecha Captain are going to earn some points for some green cubes and some black cubes, and you're massing that group of cubes all together. The trick, though, is this: the crate that has the most space trash, these unpainted cubes, gets dumped and doesn't count for scoring. That is the strategy in this game. You're trying to remember what's in each crate, especially the amount of trash that's in each crate. You're trying to dump the trash into the crate of the player who's trying to collect those points. This was one that we found when we played the game. This guy who gets 4 points for each of those red cubes. We were really tracking the red cubes because that's a lot of points, but he's only getting them for one color, but that is a lot of points. So we were trying to make sure that there were lots of these unpainted cubes in these storage containers that had those red cubes in them, because we wanted him to have the most so that would get dumped and he wouldn't get to score those cubes at the end of the scoring round. So it's very much, you've got that drafting element, but there's very much a take that element in this game, because you're distributing those unpainted cubes to try and make sure that the storage container that the other players want is not going to count once you get to that scoring round. It's tricky because you're trying to remember which cubes are in each of these 3 containers. You want to dump the trash into the containers that your opponents want. You want to make sure that your high-scoring bits are in the other containers and that don't have so much trash in them, because one of those containers is going to get eliminated before you get to count up the score. So there's so much take that in this game. Really, that's, other than memory, that's the main mechanism. Distress call is a real balance between advancing your own, earning points for yourself, and canceling points for the other players. And that's the question I have for you this episode. When you're playing a game that has those take that elements to it, do you focus on your own plans, or do you prefer to focus on spoiling everyone else's? My goodness, do we ever get some laughs when we were able to dump trash into an opponent's container so that he wasn't able to score those 4 points for those red cubes? Now, what skills are you working on when you play a game of Distress Call? Well, of course, it is all about memory. You do not get to look inside those containers to see what's there. You have to watch closely at what everyone is drafting and where they're putting those cubes. You have to put the whole pallet into one of those containers. So you are watching closely what's going on, but remembering what's what after 3 rounds does tend to be maybe more than a little challenging over time, unless you're paying close attention and working hard. It's a mental math activity too, because you're not just counting up the number of cubes, you're trying to work out the number of points that you're going to get and where are the best places to put the trash, because you want to maximize your points while minimizing everyone else's. Final thoughts about Distress Call. Well, I say final thoughts, but it is a preview. This is a prototype, and rules may change. Components are certainly going to change. There are variant rules in the rule book that we didn't even try. For example, one of the ways you can play is using the ID cards here face down, so the other players don't necessarily know what cubes you're looking for. Then you really have to reason out, based on where they're putting the trash, what is it that they're going for in the game. But based on our playthroughs, my final thoughts are this. This is a game that reminded me a lot of a game that we love at our house called Azul. Now, Azul is a game where you're drafting tiles rather than these wooden pallets. You've got these little circles that you're drafting tiles from to fill out a pattern on a player board. And one of the most fun elements, I think, of Azul, the one that my family likes the most, is that you're also drafting the pieces in a way that you're trying to mess up the other players so that they're forced to take parts that they don't want, and that's going to cause them to lose points. Now, Distress Call takes that aspect of Azul and magnifies it. Really, that's what the game is focused on. You are trying to mess with the other player's plans primarily. Yes, you're doing the drafting, and of course it adds that memory component too. You can't see which pieces are inside the crates, so it's probably the most fun memory game that I've played in recent memory, because it's not like those face down card games where you're trying to find matches. You're really trying to count up cubes over time. And I think that's a fun way of exercising your memory. But it does take take that element of Azul and magnifies it and focuses on it. I do like the components, even though this is a prototype. It is kind of fun to slot these cubes into those little boxes. And they just fit. You have to really be careful how you drop them in. So we like those components as well. The artwork is fun too. The rule book is kind of silly. I had to read it twice, honestly, because the flavor text kind of gets mixed in there. And it was sometimes I had to think about, well, wait, is that how does that play out in the game? But it's got that silly kind of science fiction theme that, like I said, reminded me of the old Paranoia rule books that I used to play when I was in high school. Now, if there are downsides to a game like Distress Call, well, one is that it's 3 to 5 players. So you cannot play the game with 2, and that's often, in my house, that's often a deal breaker. I have to invite someone else over in order to play a game that doesn't play at 2 players, because normally I would play with my son. So it doesn't play at 2 players. There's no solo version, and for some folks that might be a deal breaker. And it does focus a lot on those take that mechanics, and in some families with sensitive kids, you might find that to be a tough pill to swallow, so to speak. We like those things because you can kind of laugh at the other players and at spoiling their plans. But if we were doing those kinds of games all the time, I think it would wear on the kids, with the parents kind of doing, spoiling their plans all of the time. The other thing we noticed about the components in the prototype, we did play the game with a couple of younger kids, one of whom was under 14, and he did sometimes have to struggle a little bit to get these cubes into the little holes. I like that they sort of just fit, and you don't want to be able to see what's inside, whether you're trying to do that or see it by accident. But I know sometimes he would put it in on an angle, and it wouldn't quite fit on the first try. He'd have to fiddle around with it, and then we were all waiting for him to drop his 9 cubes into the box. But for the most part, that's not going to be a big issue. I mean, really, it's the player count and the take that mechanic that we like, but not every player, not every family is going to be into that. That would maybe be a limiting factor of this game. Some folks maybe don't like memory games so much. I don't mind them. I wouldn't want to play memory games exclusively, but I do like that fact that you're making an effort to remember what is where. So we had a good time with this game, and I have to thank the folks over at Auburn Games for sending this one my way. And that, in a nutshell, is Distress Call. If you have any suggestions or questions, if you want to answer my question about Take That versus advancing your own plans, you can leave them in the comment section below the video, or you can email me at brian@brainsongames.ca. Brainsongames.ca is the website. That's where future episodes will go, and the previous ones are up there already. Brains on Games is the Twitter handle and the Facebook page and the Instagram feed, so we're all over the place. And if you enjoyed this video and you want to be notified of future ones, you can head on over to YouTube and click that subscribe button. Thanks for joining me, and hopefully I'll see you next time.